Hello, horrorphiles.
You're listening to Dissecting Horror,
Examining the anatomy of fear in film, television, and literature.
In this episode, we'll examine The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, now streaming on Shudder.
This dissection will be spoiler-free.
Vicaria is a brilliant teenager who believes death is a disease that can be cured. After the brutal murder of her brother, she embarks on a dangerous journey to bring him back to life, according to the Internet Movie Database. The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster was written by and is the feature film directorial debut of Bonami J. Story, a writer with the last name Story. How about that?
Meant to be.
He directed 3 short films prior. This film premiered at 2023's South by Southwest Film Festival in March. In June, it was released in select U.S. theaters and hit streaming on Shudder. Quite a fast track there from festival to theaters in just 3 months.
After the opening of this film, about 3 minutes of running time, I already found myself very touched, exhilarated, and left in awe and intrigued on what was sure to be an emotional and unique take on the classic Frankenstein story. It immediately captured me and captivated me throughout as its journey unraveled more. I found the film to be powerful, poetic, tragic, fierce, refreshing, spunky, authentic, spirited, and profound in different moments, but often simultaneously. This very well might be my favorite horror film of the year so far, and likely one of my favorite films I've seen this year, regardless of genre. He created a gem, and I greatly look forward to seeing what he does next.
Leia de Leon Hayes plays Vicaria, our lead character, and she is amazing. The story starts with her as a mad scientist type. Mad in the crazed sense, not angry. In fact, this title, The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, is not exactly accurate. If anything, she is the least angry character in the story, who expresses grief more so, and is otherwise more logical in her thinking. The drug-dealing gang leader, Kango, is played by Denzel Whitaker. And no, he is related to neither Denzel Washington nor Forrest Whitaker. He was my favorite character for some reason and had the most satisfying character arc. But what is her plan exactly? She steals the body of her brother, who was killed as a result of gang violence, so she can bring him back to life. She dissects him quite a bit. He is badly decomposed. She sews him up in a very crude fashion. Does she expect him to just rejoin society in that state? What kind of existence does she expect him to have after that? She's genius enough to bring a person back from the dead, but obvious points such as these are lost on her.
I think it really ties into her and in general when someone's dealing with loss, especially the film opens up how loss and death just massively affected her life in this way that she can't get past. So it's a lot, I think, about not maybe thinking totally clearly because you're just so focused on not being able to let go, and coupled with this ambition of trying to defy odds and don't tell me there's not a way, I'll find a way. So no, she probably isn't fully thinking through, oh yeah, it'll be totally like it was before and we'll just all go back to our happy lives. But I think it's a little bit maybe proving that she can, or daring to try to figure out if she can bring one of her loved ones back to life. And I think there's a lot of similarities to, the Victor Frankenstein character, obviously, as there's meant to be, but where it's not fully thought out and there is some lack of responsibility and abandonment. Not totally, she's a little bit more of a caring, sympathetic mad scientist sort of character here, but she also doesn't really do much to nurture or stop what's happening as things escalate and carnage happens.
It is hinted that her last name is Frankenstein, Vicaria Frankenstein, a not so thinly disguised nod to Victor Frankenstein from the original tale. Her last initial is written as F on a folder, and they reference her last name as being of European German descent. Her father explains this with disdain as some overseer probably branding one of her ancestors with their last name.
There are a lot of commonalities between this film and the original Frankenstein text. First and foremost, Vicaria is our Victor Frankenstein, even being nicknamed as the mad scientist by those who don't know the level of morbid experimentation and desperation that is fueling her in the privacy of her lab. She has a book of her own called The Modern Prometheus. Like Victor, she is blinded by a certain ambition, even if well-intentioned and less career-driven than Victor, and her inability to let go of those she has lost and how it has seemed to sink her family. There is also the core theme of the original novel of people or society seeing something monstrous, ugly, or intimidating and not giving it the chance to be more. Monsters are monsters largely out of perception of fear, because someone condemned them to be one, a major theme of the book.
I like the fresh take on this classic tale. It's the Frankenstein monster story, but in an urban setting, far from its original Gothic backdrop. So dissimilar from where one would expect to see it. And I appreciate the irony that after she finds a cure for death, like a disease, the monster itself goes on to spread death among her community.
There are little things I wouldn't have minded getting more of, such as some of the side characters, even the dad, who is incredibly strong and refreshing in the moments he has, or a bigger focus on the monster itself, who is fairly one-dimensional and doesn't have the depth, heart, and curiosity the original Frankenstein's monster had. This is fairly understandable as he is more zombie-like and still has moments of confusion and horror within him. Really, though, this is Vicaria's story and one version of what a morbid, emotional, spirited Gothic horror in an urban setting, inspired by the original tale, can look like.
Before even watching the film, just seeing the title and poster, I predicted certain messaging demonizing the police and society, and especially white people. And I wasn't wrong, but I will say, if that story is important to you and you feel the need to tell it, by all means, express what's important and what motivates you as a filmmaker. I do strongly encourage your freedom of speech, so don't come at me. But this is where I get canceled and drag you down with me.
Oh, boy.
Background actors aside, literally every single white person in this film is blatantly racist or violent against blacks. This only showed negative depictions of white people and has a very strong anti-police sentiment. If nothing else, from a storytelling standpoint, this feels a bit predictable and was blatantly on the nose about it, using no subtlety or subtext to convey it. I suspect the final draft of the script was written during the George Floyd riots, when hating on and defunding the police was all the rage, and for many still is. I dare you to say something.
Yeah, I think with any, with anything that making a point, like, it can be in revenge films or feminist-driven films, that it can be important to have one decent human being character that is that party that you're critiquing. So yes, I would have welcomed there being one very positive or supportive white character in it. I mean, definitely the cops aren't there to help them and are against them. I really, again, not like all cops are evil or anything like that, but I don't mind the critique of police at all, just for the simple fact that a lot of them do abuse their power and get so focused on having that power that they let it corrupt them. And I didn't really feel like it was a huge focus. Like, yeah, there was... Obviously, their bodies are missing and police are coming after them. And there is even that one scene where the cops are knocking on the door when they're having this nice family dinner, and it becomes sort of like a high-stress, very defensive thing. But then you also have to think of things like the Breonna Taylor incident, where, again, it's a different mentality. Like, if you're not black, or, if you're white, like we are, if the cops knock on your door, I mean, I would be defensive because I'm not super trusting of cops in general, but it's not, I wouldn't think I'm about to be shot, the second a cop enters my door. And I think that fear is much more alive and prevalent even in very recent history, sadly. So I think it is, again, it's authentic to the filmmaker's experience and probably a lot of other people. It is a little bit of a social commentary and statement piece. So some of it is more representing these different forces against them, not necessarily saying every cop is out to get us, but these are some of the fears for them that they have to live with, that are more on guard than the average person might be.
Early on, the police gunned down a little black kid for no apparent reason whatsoever. They later pound at the door, as you say, as the family is having dinner, turning the doorknob and barging in so they can question all the tenants about a crime. It was very Nazi, tyrannical-like levels of oppression. And I'm sure it's happened to someone somewhere, but obviously, without a warrant or probable cause, the police just aren't going to do that. Anything obtained would be worthless, so there's no point. I felt it was just way too exaggerated. It felt so contrived and such a stretch that the black population would be living under that level of constant oppression by the police, who, despite being in a predominantly black area, were always white, murderous, and evil. Not that most of the black population are portrayed as particularly delightful either, in all fairness.
Yeah, I suppose just for, I guess, the representation, they could have had, whether it be a black police officer or different minorities, they could have had one or two of those on the police force if, that community is heavily black in particular. I guess that would have been slightly more realistic.
And I know I'm really tempting fate here, encroaching upon this conversation too, but I have noticed, innocently enough, that most black filmmakers often seem to hold race as their central theme. Jordan Peele, Spike Lee, Tyler Perry as examples. You can certainly make a movie about inner city life and gang violence and police brutality, all good. It's your freedom. But if you're gay, for example, your movie is more than likely to showcase gay issues. Or if you're a woman, it's got feminist girl bosses and man bashing. Why can't you just be a black, gay, fat, disabled trans woman and make a movie about robots or something? Why is one forever bound to mainly generating content dedicated to that marginalized group you're a part of?
I mean, you can make a film about whatever you want, and I'm sure many of those people then do. But again, most people say, write what you know, and writing, filmmaking, any type of art can be very therapeutic, and especially if, maybe when some of these filmmakers were younger, they felt like they didn't have enough representation of that or enough stories that reflected their experience. It's not crazy to think that they would want to make a film that represented what their reality and what their truth was, especially, if they're, even in, again, the past couple years alone, it's not like many of these issues have totally been resolved. It's still things that are a part of their identity and experience, and they want to explore through storytelling. So I think that's great, and why shouldn't they? But they can sure also make a film that's about any number of things without societal or identity politics or undertones. But they can make whatever story that they want, but it is a part of who they are and their experience, so it makes sense to me.
Yes, and I agree with that, except if, for example, let's say we have in this film, we get in the middle of some random scene a shoehorned in discussion about systemic racism or other racial issues that have nothing to do with the movie, one of which describes how real history can be found in Malcolm X, while Columbus was just a human trafficking rapist. Like, what the hell does that have to do with this story? Again, from a proper filmmaking standpoint. I think my issue more than anything is when it's not really aligning with the theme or the story, but it's more you and your activism taking advantage to get on your soapbox and decry things which are not relevant. God, I really would like to keep politics out of our podcast. So, but here I go.
I mean, I can see how it might feel like a departure from just a girl dealing with death and loss who's experimenting with, this macabre coming to life monster and then spiraling and affecting. I could see how personal politics isn't necessarily needed, but it was sparse throughout. But for me, I didn't feel like it wasn't like every scene they were just kind of going over and over again, which if they did, that's fine. I think this was just true to their lives. And, there's kids out on the street getting shot, and even just like the gang and how that ends up being something that affects most people in this community one way or another, and just the difficulty and kind of rising above and finding their own path.
I think those points could have been more artfully woven into the story through metaphor or something that wasn't just so on the nose.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like if your message is that all police are evil, or if there's some other societal points you want to make, this isn't necessarily going to resolve anything. If you're introducing this message to make a statement, vilifying the police or white people or whatever, it doesn't bring the two sides together. It's more divisive. It demonstrates the police as being villains that are encouraged to be mocked or fought against, which doesn't bring peace to anything. So it seems like kind of a backwards message. If anything, it seems more harmful to the Black community by fostering further hostilities. What is your goal? Like, what do you think this accomplishes?
I mean, that's probably true. Like, I don't think this film is gonna garner peace or hospitality between people that things like this are happening to and cops. I think it was more just to illustrate just the reality of this community and what their lives were like and the hardships that they were under, and then why they go these other extreme routes.
Kelsey and I, in fact, first met on a feature called The Frankenstein Monster Project, which I finished just before the pandemic, which one day I'll get around to finding distribution for. I cast her as the Bride of Frankenstein. It did do a festival run last year and garnered some nominations and even a Best Actor award for one of our leads, Jeff Dujardin. The Frankenstein Monster Project is basically the Blair Witch Project, but 100 years earlier, and with the Frankenstein monster instead. I'll link the trailer and a full scene in the description. Anyways, the original and ultimate zombie to me, the Frankenstein monster, is death brought back to life. But it's more than that. This idea of taking body parts from different persons and piecing them together to make a whole new individual, the questions that raises. Who is this now? Is it a composite of all those different personalities, or has it become a new individual, or just a soulless life form? This aspect is what fires my imagination most, yet really isn't explored in The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster.
Yeah, I mean, it is, of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is just such a iconic, riveting, profound story, and is amazing how long it is and will surely continue to really connect and affect people. But I think also one of the things that was really great about the original text, I think, is probably at the time the unexpected sort of mind and heart of the monster. I feel like he has over time lived up to be one of the most definitely beloved monsters in some ways, and for that element of being misunderstood, but also he does kind of become what people choose to make him or think that he is. Again, I think that would probably be my one thing I would have liked to see more of, like that that side of the monster here to sort of dig in and establish more, who it is as this new entity, or what elements of Chris is still there. And there's little moments of that bewilderment and maybe slight moments of that like subtle heart that he kind of feels like he knows these people and feels like he should be connected. But the moments with him are fairly, aside from attacking, are fairly minimal. So that's probably the one thing I would have liked more, to really dig into him more as a character, and to get us to love and understand his whole process and what he is piecing through and trying to understand and hungering for in many ways. But again, this was really more a Vicaria's story, and I think in many ways she, at least for me, maybe you didn't like her as much, but at least for me, I found her to be a lot more caring and infectious and bold, and in some ways very flawed, in some ways very inspiring. So it was enjoyable enough just to see it through her eyes and what she needed this to be.
Overall, I thought it was all right. There was much to admire, but I think it had potential for reaching a much higher level for its story and characters. Their motivations didn't quite gel for me. It leaned way too much into the predictable tropes of inner city life and was too heavy-handed with its social messaging. It had some powerful moments of tragedy, which, along with the acting, saved this movie for me. However, the pacing was too slow for my taste, and the visual effects weren't great, to put it mildly.
If you enjoyed this deep cut, you'll love the podcast in full.
If you would like to join our society of grotesquerie and loathing, subscribe now and give this podcast a like.
And be sure to comment your wretched thoughts below.
Keep our podcast suffering on by finding it in your cold, black, withered hearts to support us on Patreon.
A link to our PayPal is also below for one-time donations of any amount.
It was nice knowing you.